So we're joined by my friend, attorney with Burr Foreman down in Jackson, John Lassiter. We thank you so much for joining us. I think this is the fourth time you've been with us. I got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County Schools, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, Rosa Scott, Madison Central, the Academic Option Center, and our YouTube channel. We're in the law career cluster, and it's always good to have a Madison County Schools parent. You're there in the Mav zone. Join us yet again.
Glad to be here. Hello, everybody.
Now, obviously, we want to talk about all the things an attorney does, and we also want to talk about your great role in changing our state flag. But just give us a little background. Clinton High School, Mississippi College, and Mississippi College School of Law.
That's right. No, I grew up in Clinton. My mother taught at MC at Mississippi College, and she was in the literature department over there. And so that's why I grew up in Clinton. She loved to read and you know, shared a lot of stories with me when I was a kid. And I learned that I like stories and like to read too. And so I became an English major at MC. And when you're an English major, you can really do a number of things if you go off to a bigger market. But sometimes, teaching and the law are two really, really good careers that you can have if you study literature and grammar and things like that. And so I had to make a decision whether I was going to teach or go into law, and then I went into law. Fortunately, we have a really good school here in Jackson, Mississippi College School of Law,
Yeah.
and I'm actually got it here on the if you can see it here
Yeah.
on my coffee mug. But ended up going there, so it's right here downtown. MC, there's a huge benefit to that because it being in downtown Jackson, Greg. All the judges are here with the Supreme Court and with the Court of Appeals and with the Hinds County Chancery and Circuit and county judges. So it's a really good opportunity, and a lot of law firms are down here in downtown. It's a great opportunity as a student to live and work around the people that kind of drive the profession in this state, and it really benefited me because I met my firm while I was in law school there at MC. And I really am less than, I don't know, 300 yards away from the school right now as we talk. And I've been working here for about, I hate to say it, about 20 years. So,
Yeah, and that's a great point because as people are, if we have kids that are interested in law school, that's something to think about because obviously nothing against Ole Miss Law because they do a great job up there as well. And there's also LSU and some other ones, but being in right there in downtown Jackson, there are so many law firms because being a good law student is not just having the great GPA. You've got to network. You've got to go ahead and get some experience as a clerk. You've got to work during the summer, get some experience working with contracts, get some experience working in court, get to know the judges, get to know some of the district attorneys. So it is extremely important, the networking aspect, not only in undergrad, but in law school as well. And I think that's what Mississippi College School of Law offers that I think is always overlooked.
I think that's absolutely true. And look, that's not just true about law, right? I mean, that's true about any profession that you kids undertake. I mean, it's going to be about networking and selling yourself to people and your abilities and your responsiveness and your investment in helping people or servicing them, whatever it is ultimately you do. So yeah, it's a really important, and the MC, I mean, really has a blessing of location. But no, I don't mean to slight Ole Miss or any other school. Like every one of the law schools in this state will prepare you for your career very, very well. So
Now, obviously, when people think law, they think attorney. And you even said this yourself. You wanted to be an attorney from watching Law and Order. I was a big fan of Law and Order. I love the show All Rise. As kids, we watched Matlock,
oh yeah.
um, and, and some of those. So we see that side of law. We see the nailing somebody on the witness stand and making the big courtroom speech and getting in front of a jury. The Matthew McConaughey speech in A Time to Kill. We all remember that. And then throwing somebody in jail because they broke the law. But that is only about 2 to 3% of what law actually does. There's a you've been an attorney for over 20 years now. You have never, ever in your career, even remotely, dealt with somebody that was going to jail. That is such a small part of law. And, one thing I think is important too is a lot of kids think if I'm dealing with an attorney, that means I'm in trouble. That means somebody's going to come after me and I'm going to jail. Well, there are so many things in your life that you need an attorney for that has nothing to do with anybody getting locked up. If you're ever going to buy a business, if you're going to buy land, if you're going to get married, especially if you're getting married and they're kids from a previous marriage, getting a will and a will and a state together. making sure all your paperwork is in order to open a business. So there are, if you're going to adopt, and heaven forbid if you ever get divorced. So there are so many things that attorneys touch that has absolutely nothing to do with anybody getting locked up. And I think that is so important because it's not something to be afraid of. And I think it's something also to be aware of because something that I've learned just in the last few months talking to attorneys. One of the ugliest things that is going on right now in Mississippi is a lot of these rural people don't have will and testament set up. They don't have anything legal on a contract to say, when I pass away, here's who gets what. And people are going in court and they're fighting, saying, Mama said I could have this. She said I could have this, and you can't have it. And it is turning into an absolute horrible thing, tearing families apart. So that's why it's so important to be familiar with what attorneys can do for you.
No, there's no question about that, and I think everything you said is absolutely true. I remember, studying in high school and college. There weren't a lot of surprises. It was, you're taught things, and or at least this was true for me. Real world application. A lot of the things I did at that point didn't always feel like VOTEC and like real world application type stuff. But when I got to law school, I don't know, it was like a light went off where everything I was studying touches every part of what we do as a society. So, like, everywhere, if somebody falls down the sidewalk outside of a building, well, was there a crack in the sidewalk? Was it properly maintained? Was it her fault because she was looking at her phone? I mean, the law has rules for all of those circumstances. And you're right. I mean, wills are such an important part of it. If you move from one employment to another, you might want a lawyer to check out your employment contract before you get to the next business or the next hire. So yeah, what you said is absolutely true. And I'll tell you this, even if you go to law school and you think you want to be a lawyer, well, a legal education prepares you for all sorts of different business pursuits and things like that. Even if you didn't actually practice law, it teaches you, how the world works, how the country works, what are some rules and regulations that might affect what you want to do in your career, even if it's outside of law. It just really prepares you in how to think about things, how to address problems, how to persuade people to follow you into something. All those things are really important life skills. And I would recommend law school to anybody, even if you weren't actually going to practice law.
Yeah, and then something else, even if you have kids that say, "Look, I'm interested in law, but I'm not really wanting to make the investment of time and money into law school." We also need a lot of good paralegals. They have a great role in a law office, and that's something you can get in a 4-year degree and not have to go to law school.
I'm so glad you said that. It's funny. Young people, they run into nursing in the medical field. And I don't know about you, Greg, but I'd be a terrible nurse. I, there's just a lot required of nurses. I mean, late hours, night shifts. You're dealing with, really, really sad circumstances sometimes for patients. I mean, hard hitting type stuff. And I see all these young people run into nursing, and man, is it a noble profession? I mean, I'm so glad that people do it. But I almost feel like the paralegal field gets forgotten. I mean, you can make an incredibly good living, helping out lawyers as they prepare for cases and have good office hours and not the same sort of hours you would have in medical. And again, not a slight to that profession at all, but we have a really difficult time finding folks who have been trained in paralegaling and that want to do that work. And it always surprises, especially young people. Most of the paralegals we have in this office, they're in their 50s or 60s. So there's such a great opportunity for young people to come up and fill some of those roles. And I just don't know that it's talked about nearly enough. So thank you for talking about it. And yes,
Yeah.
I would highly
And then
recommend it.
I've had a few judges say, look, we need more court reporters. We need more court administrators. So getting into that area, again, great hours. You're not going to be, unless it's a very extenuating circumstance, you're not going to be in court all hours of the night. And even though
Yes,
you're not going to court an awful lot, you deal with court reporters all the time because they're there at depositions. So it is another thing that is really needed in the legal profession.
absolutely. Absolutely. Let the lawyers work the long hours. You guys just help them out from 9 to 5 and hand it over. But no, there's so many different, court reporting, court administrating, clerking for judges. There's I mean, there's so many people working in the Chancery Clerk office right now in land records, things like that. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities, career opportunities in the law, and yeah, I just hope people just know that, because I didn't know that when I was a high school student. I don't know that you did either. Yeah, there's just so many opportunities out there, so don't miss them.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, we'd be completely remiss. And I know you downplay it and you don't take the credit you deserve, but you probably more than anybody else in the state of Mississippi had a huge role in changing the state flag in 2021. So, obviously, this was a big deal. It was a legal issue. It had to be voted on by the state legislature, but you started the ball rolling just by a letter to the NCAA. So just tell us about that process and why you did it, because it was a big deal for our entire state economy.
It seems like a long time ago now, Greg, that all that happened. It was during COVID, and I don't know that it's true at all to say that I had a more major role than anybody else in it, but I did have a prominent role, and I think it began when you and I were in college together. You were such a great friend to me, and continue to be. But like, you remember when we voted on the state flag? They had actually had a challenge to the state flag, and they suggested maybe a new flag instead of that old flag we had at the time. And I remember you and I talking about it. We kind of thought that the new flag would pass. This
Yeah.
was in 2001, 2002. I don't quite, maybe 2003, but man, when that went to vote, the old flag won with like 65% of the vote. And I remember being floored by it, because
Yeah.
I could never understand, why our state would want a symbol that's divisive. You know, uh, when you go somewhere else and you talk about Mississippi, I mean, you want to throw a symbol at them that you can be proud of and that everybody can be proud of. And so many times in the state we don't do a very good job of bringing people together. We do a good job of splitting us up. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to go forward together because we're all Mississippians. And so I think that's what it stayed with me. And for many years, and as I became a lawyer and kind of looked at it, I talked to people here and there, and they would say, "Oh, it'll never happen." And I actually had a manufacturing client from Germany. Have I ever told you this story? They
Yeah. This is interesting.
Okay, so a guy about my age who I became close friends with because I did a lot of work for him in Alabama. But he told me one time that he had come to Jackson, and I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, I've come twice. Once I came to go to Memphis in May, so I was just driving through, and the other time I came to look at a manufacturing site just south of Jackson in the Florence area for this site. And y'all, the project that they built in Alabama was a $6 billion project. Okay, it employs, I don't know, 3,500 people right now, and during construction, probably almost 20,000 people touched that project. And so
Wow.
Alabamians got these jobs. And he said, we thought about Mississippi, that the package that the state gave us was the same as the package in Alabama, but we just couldn't put a site there. And I said, really? And he said, well, yeah, I mean, think about your state flag. I mean, it's not the only reason, but think about your state flag. Germans, we know symbols, and the swastika has been such a problem for us for so long. Well, what do you think the German media would do if we built a project just south of Jackson? What they would do is stick the swastika right next to your state flag and say, why did this company a bunch of nationalists, or white nationalists, that put their project right there? Is that why they put it in Mississippi? And look, that wouldn't have been the reality, but it was the perspective, and the media would have jumped on that. And man, when he told me that, it didn't. I always knew what was right, but it gave a business hook to it too. It's like, man, Mississippians are losing. We're losing out on opportunities because of this state flag. And so, y'all, I took it to heart, and I always wanted, a state flag where, like, if we sent, a little league team from Grenada up to the Little League World Series. I mean, how nice would it be for them to be able to stick the state flag on their lapel? They couldn't do it. If there were 10 black kids and 2 white kids on this team, they couldn't wear that old state flag as a lapel and be proud of it. It was a horrible situation. Again, divisive from the jump. So as a lawyer, it's funny. You start to learn how to push certain items and incentivize people to do things. And really, all the state needed was a little political incentive to change the flag. And I knew, because I'm a sports guy, and I know Mr. Poggett's a sports guy too. But I knew how big college baseball is in this state. I mean, we know college football is huge. We know that pro football is a huge thing in this state with fans, all over. But college baseball is a big deal in this state because all three of our big schools, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Southern, they have pretty good teams, and year in and year out they could host tournaments, that happen in Hattiesburg and Oxford and Starkville, and they are big deals economically for those cities because a lot of people come into the towns and they spend money, and it's just a really big deal around these tournaments. And I said, man, if there's a way that I could find, if I could convince the NCAA to quit allowing us to have those tournaments until we change the flag, I know that it would, because really, I mean, the whole environment was this tinderbox where as soon as somebody stepped out and said, "Hey, we got to change this thing," I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I worked with some really good people at the NCAA. It was hard to get them to understand how big college baseball was down here, but once they finally understood it, they came with me and they decided. Hey, it was on Juneteenth of 2020. I still remember. They called me earlier that week to tell me they were going to announce a new requirement that the state flag not feature the Confederate emblem, and they were going to do it on Juneteenth. And y'all, they did it, and 11 days later, that flag had changed. Because people just couldn't, we couldn't lose anymore. People were tired of losing because of that. And I'm sorry, I'll say it to everybody, that stupid flag we had. Um,
Yeah.
um, so anyway, but there's more to the story, but I wrote a letter to the NCAA basically saying that, with baseball and tennis and volleyball, I mean, those are majority white participation sports. And for whatever the reason, the NCAA had a rule that said that those sports could play, postseason tournaments in Mississippi because they weren't predetermined sites. They're tournaments that are awarded to these schools because they had good seasons. And so the NCAA actually had a rule on the books that said that those tournaments could happen, but no predetermined site type tournaments could happen in Mississippi. So, guys, we couldn't host college football bowl games. We couldn't host college basketball games in the tournament. And, some people would say we couldn't do that anyway, but I don't think that's true at all. I think we could host something like that on the coast or even here in Jackson if we made some improvements to our Coliseum. But what I told the NCAA is, I mean, those are majority white sports. And guess what? If you're a white person in the state of Mississippi that plays these sports, you can go off to these schools and play, and your mommy and daddy can see you play, just by driving 30 minutes. But these majority black sports like basketball, and I'm talking about majority participation, basketball and football, these kids would have to go play their bowl games in Boise and off in, Savannah or wherever it was. And I got the NCAA to realize that, their own policy was discriminating where, young kids here in Jackson and elsewhere, they didn't have the opportunity to see these big sporting events because of the policy that existed before. So I told them they had to change the policy to include all the sports. And the second they did that, that was, I truly believe the incentive that really the domino effect started. That was the first domino to fall. I think the Baptist convention came out, Greg, remember, and spoke against the flag.
And then the Mississippi Republican Party as well. Philip Gunn in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House is a Republican, came out almost immediately and said Mississippi Republicans are behind this. And then you're right, the Mississippi Southern Baptist did as well. And then it was just a domino effect.
Yeah, Economic Council, and to Mr. Gunn's credit, to Philip's credit, I mean, he'd always been very vocal against that flag. Trey Lamar was part of the Republican Party that did that. Just it took true leadership to get out there and realize, what was happening. Because I'll remind you, during all this, I mean, these were the days where George Floyd was killed. I mean, there was a lot of social unrest, and a very, very heightened sense of, hey, things had to change. It was really just a perfect time for Mississippi to get it right, and we did. And I was just, hey, Greg, I'm just happy to be a small part of it. It's a long time ago now, and I think, man, what a great thing it's been. I think people are proud of the flag we have now. They did a good job choosing it, and man, I have hats and I wear them proudly everywhere I go when I travel. So I'll tell you this, I've been around the country, and Mississippi is a great place. Some of the things that drive us crazy about Mississippi, like, it is slow to change sometimes. There's not a whole lot going on around here, but I'll tell you, and maybe it's just my age catching up with me, Greg, but man, it's nice to be here where you don't have so much traffic. There's not all this distraction all the time. You can really, there's good people here. You can get to know people, and kind of rest in life a little bit. The beauty of nature. I mean, there's so much that Mississippi has going for it. And I think a lot of the things that drove us crazy about Mississippi as technological advancements happen, as the world changes so quickly with AI and everything that's going on, it's going to be nice to be here where we got a lot of land, and a lot of good people.
Yeah,
So
and that state flag was what, that was indirectly responsible for bringing Amazon here. And now Amazon Web Service that's coming, you got a new bottling plant. So a lot of these companies are like, look, they're going to change. We're going to come to Mississippi. The taxes aren't as high, and there's a lot of land, so let's open a factory. So they built the Milwaukee Tool up in Grenada. So it's just, and then there's been all types of baseball tournaments down on at Biloxi at Keefer Federal Park, and they build more casinos. So just more and more a national investment that came from the work that you guys did for our state flag. So that was just such a great thing business wise. It's created more jobs here, and obviously more legal jobs as well. So I always love hearing that story, and I think it's important for our kids to realize how that happened. But I do have some questions for students. And some of these have bad handwriting, but I'll get them. I'll do the best I can.
we'll forgive them. Hey, even if you have bad handwriting, you can be a lawyer because I have bad handwriting too. So,
I like this one. This is Levon Johnson. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, "What was the hardest part of changing the flag?"
huh. Um, the hardest part of changing the flag was getting people to believe that change can happen, that it could actually happen. And, a lot of people will tell you things in your life. Hey, this is never going to happen. This is not how we do things, whatever. And I'll tell you, and of course, I'm not young anymore, but do not believe people when they tell you that. You folks, I hope the people watching this are young and they understand what youth means and how great it is to be young and how much just being young should be celebrated. I mean, you guys are the smartest generation there's ever been. I'll just tell you, anybody telling you different, it's not true. I know a lot of kids y'all's age, and they can do things on computers, and they can learn things that people my age and older than me, we can't even understand it, much less like learn it with you. And so y'all are brilliant minds, a great generation, and you're going to make change. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. You can. The hardest part of changing that flag was trying to get people to realize that even something that's existed for 140 years or whatever it was, that it can change. And so, that's all part of it. Changing people's minds. Some people are resistant to change. You got to convince them, hey, this change is going to be for your good, and it's going to be for the good of everybody. And I think that's the toughest part. But I just encourage you guys to don't ever sell yourself short. An idea, a really good idea, can change a lot of things. And I think that's one thing I took away from this.
Absolutely. I like this one. This is Alicia Black. She's in 9th grade. And she asked, what is the most rewarding and the most challenging aspects of being an attorney?
Hmm. So that's a great question. When you go into the field, I think you go to school to help people. You go to school to try to, make things easier for people and improve people's lives. And so that the most rewarding thing is to when somebody has treated somebody unfairly or not. And this is another thing you guys are going to learn. I hate to be pessimistic or cynical, but a lot of people in your life are going to tell you they're going to do something and then not do it. A lot of people. Don't be that person. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, that's a really, really important thing. And you need to do it. You need to do it because I'll tell you where I sit, a lot of people promise something. They put something in writing to somebody that they're going to do something, and then they get paid for it, and then they don't do it. And that's what our civil justice system does. Is it irons that stuff out. It deals with those problems. So when you have somebody that's been taken advantage of, and you help them get back where they were supposed to be, that's a
Absolutely.
really, really good feeling. The most challenging thing about my job is I probably touch 10 to 12 cases, in a given week. Okay. And every one of those clients want to be the most important thing I have going on. And they're all very important to me. But there's a rhythm to it. And you might be able to do this one day, and this might have to not be touched till the next day and the next day. And so the hardest thing is to keep people from being disappointed in the timing of it, because not every legal thing is going to happen like that. I mean, some of these cases can last 1, 2, even 3 years before they're actually decided. And so, giving people that expectation, letting them know that the legal process can be a little slower than maybe they want it to be or they hope it can be, managing that expectation is the most challenging thing I probably do um, on a daily basis. The only other thing is, when you get your dishwasher fixed at the house, somebody charges you $200. Well, guess what? You pay it. Like if you go take your car in to get fixed, they call you and they say, oh, it's going to be $600. And you're like, oh, I can't believe that, but you pay it. Well, it's funny when you send a lawyer bill out to somebody and you say, hey, I spent 8 hours doing this and it's going to cost $2,400. They think, well, surely I can just pay you $1,700, or surely I can just pay you $1,400, because it's a little different, right? It's a service. I don't know. There's something about the law there where people, they're not crazy about always paying your bill. But remember, you have your time. That's what you're offering people, your time and your expertise. And I need to do a better job about this. But if somebody owes you on a bill, I need to go. You need to go collect it. You need to demand that they pay it. And sometimes and I know this is being recorded, so hopefully my clients don't see this, but I have to finalize bills like that, and sometimes work something out with my client. That can be difficult too. It goes back to people saying they're going to do something, and then ultimately trying to get out of the deal. So
I got time for two more. This is Sidney Evans. He's in ninth grade, one of our baseball players. And he asked, how do you convince a client that what you're doing is correct when they don't like the direction you're going?
what a good question. What a good question. So your client owns their case. Okay. I mean, it's their case. And so all you can do is make the best argument you can for them. And all you can do is give them the best advice you can in the moment. Okay. I try to convince, and it always happens where, a client can't decide, they think they should get $50,000 on this case. And I'm just using round numbers. That's how much money they're out. And the reality is their case isn't a great case. So what you'll do is you'll tell them, look, you can pay me a lot of money to fight this over 2 years. Or, they've already offered you $30,000. And sometimes it's better just to take that settlement and take a deep breath in and move on with your life. Because if you just fight with these people for 2 years, I mean, the chance you might even lose and have to pay me and then get nothing. And so there's conversations like that happen all the time in my career, and really, it takes the client kind of really being able to communicate to them, how good it can be to move on from something. Because I'm telling you, you can get real mired and deep into a fight, whether it be like I see a lot of family members fighting, about money a lot of times, and they're hurt on both sides. There's a lot of hurt. And sometimes the best advice you can give somebody is to move on. And so that's one thing that I deal with a lot. It's not always easy, and sometimes the client is not going to take your advice. And if they don't, but they're paying you, you move on and you keep litigating the case for them, and you finish things up. And sometimes they'll have remorse. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, I should have taken the deal that was on the table a year ago." And I think this is true for criminal too, right? I mean, like it's true for
Yeah.
criminal practice too, because sometimes a plea bargain will be offered to somebody, and they don't want to admit that they did anything wrong. They don't want their families to know. They don't want their mom, to know. They don't want their friends to know, and so they don't take the plea and they go to trial. And guess what? They could have served 3 months, and then they're in jail for 3.5 years, and It's just a good lawyer is going to be able to communicate that risk to somebody, and a good client's going to trust their lawyer that their lawyer would advise them correctly. So,
Absolutely. I got one more. This is Anaya Edmonds. She's in ninth grade. And she asked, if I was going to be an attorney, what would be the best way to decide what law to get into?
hmm. um, you know, prepping to be an attorney, I think it really starts in college. You know, you in college you could take some classes. At Mississippi College they offered a criminal justice degree. You know, there's other things you can focus on in college that would give you a feel for some of the things. Whether it's a pre law degree that you get or a paralegal degree, and you're going to get exposed to a lot of different areas of the law. I mean, most of what I do, and y'all, this is going to sound so boring, but most of what I do is chase money for contractors. If they build a building and then the owner says, "Oh, there's an issue with the building. I'm not going to pay you 200,000. I'm going to pay you 150,000." They get into a dispute, and I might be involved in trying to get that to a resolution. Did I know I was going to do that? I did not. I didn't. I think Greg's probably right. When I watched Law and Order, I mean, I thought I was going to be Jack McCoy. I thought I was going to be doing some closing argument in front of a jury and hearing a bunch of witnesses say you can't handle the truth, but that hasn't been the case. I do something completely different. But I think it begins in college. You dabble in some things and are able to focus on some things. And then in law school, look, I mean, you have 3 years there. And after the first year, which also, 6 different classes, you have contracts, property law, I mean, constitutional law. You have a lot of different things that you're exposed to. And then the second and third year, I mean, you can specify some really specific things to study. I mean, Fed tax is a class. You can get into taxes, and criminal is obviously there's trial classes and criminal classes, criminal procedure, things like that. Some that you have to take and some that you can elect to take, and you're going to get a great feel for the areas of law that you're most interested in. Like intellectual property is something I just love. The idea, like how McDonald's it has that slogan, "I'm loving it." I mean, somebody created that, and then McDonald's as a business, you know, that's the saying "I'm loving it" is a huge value to McDonald's. So there's a legal process by which they can protect that saying so that no one else can use it and no one else can confuse another business with McDonald's. I mean, things like that. You'll get exposed to them in school, and you'll say, I really want to do that. I want to find a way to make that the focus of my practice. And y'all, from there, I mean, the possibilities are endless. I mean, there's patent laws, there's all sorts of things that you can practice. And really, it envelops our entire life. I mean, everything you run into on a daily basis, it's because of our justice system and our civil justice system. And the idea that in America, you can own things, truly own things, you personally. You can own land, you can own a car. Our system of how ownership works has always been really advanced. We were kind of the first, country to really hone in on those type things, personal ownership, and it's because of our civil justice system that exists, and it's something to be proud of. It really is something. I know that people say things about our country, and we got a lot of problems in our country. Don't get me wrong, but it is a great place to live if you travel the world. Our system of justice, and our ownership rights here, it's just better than anywhere. I mean, everyone else in the world wants to invest here, even in the current climate. They want to be here, and don't take that for granted. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity sitting right out there for you. If you just work hard, I know you can do it. And look, I look forward to seeing you guys as you get older. Right here at home. Some of y'all will choose to live here and start adulthood here. I can't wait to see what you do. And if I can be a help to any of you, Mr. Greg has my contact information, and I'm a lifer. I'm here, and of course my kids are in Madison County Schools. So if I can answer any questions you have, just reach out to me. I'll be glad to do it. Okay.
And we appreciate it. We're almost out of time, and we thank you so much as always for taking time for us. But before we go, we talked about many aspects of the legal system, many careers in the legal system. And like you said, we need good young people to get into this. So why should these kids really consider getting into this field?
You should consider getting into this field because knowledge is power. Okay, the knowledge that studying law would give you would set you above other folks. It would set you apart when you're trying to be hired. There is no, I mean this. There's a lot of professions where you can help people, but there are very few professions where you can make a societal difference or a difference in the life of a single individual person like you can if you have a law degree and a bar license. You can make some serious change. You can do some serious good, and you can stand for something. I just encourage you guys to look into it. It's been really great for me. It wasn't something I knew that I wanted to do till towards the end of college for me. So you guys are already ahead of the game there. The fact that you're even watching this means that you are head and shoulders beyond anything I was doing, when I was 15, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. But no, I greatly encourage it. The people you meet, every case is different. It offers a challenge. There's nothing boring about what I do. There's just a lot of opportunity, to do it. My job pays well in general, in considering other professions. And yeah, it's made my dreams come true for my family and for myself. And yeah, we just love to see you, the next generation of lawyers. We need you because we got a lot of older lawyers retiring, and there's a lot of change to be made and a lot of progress to be made in that vacuum there. So come join me in the legal profession.
Love it. Well, again, we thank you so much for joining us. John Lassiter down there in downtown Jackson with Burr Foreman Law Group. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
I see you.